Changing lanes. Peter. I must say that it was one of Constantine's spiritual advisors that ended up by persuading him to paint the pagan Christian symbol of the cross on his shields. Because he stated that a symbol of the cross was seen by Constantine and him in the clouds the night before their military confrontation with the enemy. He said that it was a sign from his Christian God, and that he should do so if he wanted to be victorious in battle. And then this proving to be a good idea with the subsequent victory against all odds, which in turn boosted the morale of his soldiers, which led to the Romans replacing their many gods for the one God as Christianity became Roman. As he marched victorious from battlefield to battlefield, he eventually had an enormous banner with the symbol painted on it, and this put fear into his superstitious enemies, as they either got mowed down or ran from the battlefield in fear of their lives. If that vision was never seen, when it was, and if Constantine was not so ambitious and susceptible and waited for his extra troops that were eagerly marching toward the battle to help out. Christianity, Roman Catholicism, and all the other derivatives would have probably blinked out of existence without being recognized by nothing other than a few wishful thinkers in history, like so many other pagan myths before them. In a nutshell, the Roman Empire was divided into two parts. He defeated Rome, then made a deal with East Rome in Greece by marrying off his sister to their leader, and together they wiped out the other. When an assassination attempt on his life was squashed, that was sent by his new brother-in-law, because he was replacing their age-old religion with his newfound Christianity. He took away his power and had his sister, her husband and their child exiled, then later assassinated, and then he became the sole ruler of the Roman Empire, and with that he built Christian churches on old pagan sites, and fortified his belief where it eventually became the papal state. Yes, Constantine forced his new religion into the mainstream, and then got his spin doctors to rewrite it as his new Roman Empire saw fit. For instance, they removed reincarnation and karma, although the residue can be found, like that excerpt from the New Testament about Jesus, his disciples and the blind man that was mentioned earlier. All I am saying, and please excuse the pun, is do not take everything that is written in the New Testament as gospel, for if history did not fall the way that it did, we still might believe in the many gods. Or perhaps, I suspect, they would have been transformed into the forces of nature. Please carry on, my friend, and sorry for taking you off the beaten track. Andrew cut in. That is okay, old chap, and it has slightly brushed me aside. But I get your point, and would like to pick up with a bit of history myself, and I shall be back on track in no time at all, and at the same time, it will not contradict with your wisdom. Egypt saw the need to unify when it changed from selective tribes with differing deities into North and South Egypt, that was then swallowed up and unified by Christianity, and eventually harmonized with Islam. The Native Americans and the African tribesmen could not unite in this way, and their tribes were wiped out or enslaved by those vicious European Christians who used God's name in vain so as they could invade, conquer, and plunder their new world of all its land, gold and treasures. No wonder on these two accounts alone, people have a problem with the word God. Then, there is the word of God, and this is even more diabolical than all the chaos and plunder that I have just mentioned. It seems that there are many interpretations of God's law and wisdom. Now, it seems to me that God is the product of many interpretations, and each and every one of them believe, as our friend said earlier, that they and only they are right. God is an abstract, and as soon as one attaches a name, this leads to a personality, which then subsequently follows through with a grand soul plan and world order, which is, God works in mysterious ways. So put up with what has been dealt and get on with it, or you will be damned to hellfire. Well, when one listens or reads the actual accounts from the medium, sitter and discarnate spirits on the other side, one can see another God, and that God is not choosy on who gets to enter spiritual heaven. In fact, it seems that it is down to one's own free will and karma that decides who or when one is able to cross over. It seems from the knowledge taken from all three participants and the correlation between both dimensions in a regular or standard sitting, joint with the knowledge from the Ghostbusters that are sometimes called upon to help discarnate ghosts mature and then cross over into spirit, that God breathes life into our spiritual beings and unites us with a special karmic journey where we are gently and sometimes harshly helped to spiritually evolve or unfold, so as we can have an insurmountable amount of diverse infinite light beings in spiritual heaven. Those light beings making up both young and old souls who journey together from God through karma and then on into spiritual perfection and harmony where they can add to the grand scheme of things. Why do we have to fall from grace or perfection and live this karmic life, one might ask? Well, could it be that God wanted to create imperfection from perfection, and then perfection from that imperfection? For how else could one ascertain an infinite amount of personal spiritual beings within eternity, if those infinite beings did not go through the aforementioned processes? One cannot write a journal about one's travels throughout China without actually going there, can they? It is in the falling from grace into ignorance that gives us our personal identities and diverse characters. For if we did not fall, we would have always known the truth, that we are all part of God, and the illusion would be shattered, or simply seen as a sham. However, once we have been sculptured, or scribed by our ignorance, transience and spiritual perfection, we are who we are, and like characters in a never-ending play we play out our roles in spiritual utopia, and as we do so we add to the integrity of all that perfection. Now, just like the ancient tribes and totems that were swallowed up by theism, so as they could unite and survive against threatening nations who had already made the change, it is time to drop theism and find a global belief system. For now they are nothing but outdated tribesmen in the wake of the silicon chip and the information superhighway alone, let alone our neo-spiritual enlightenment and the rise of globalism. It is time for the lion to lay with the lamb and the Christian and Muslim to come together and lie down peacefully with the Hindu, Taoist and Buddhist. I like to propose that just like those ancient Christians that were willing to sacrifice their physical lives for their belief, now is the time for the new age hippies to lay down their lives, if that is what it takes for the world to find peace, bliss and harmony on earth as it is in heaven. Of course, I do not mean that in the literal sense. We must not let them throw us to the lions or crucify us on crosses. We must enlighten them like St. Paul cleverly tricked those ancient Greeks in that classic yarn where he says that Logos was his god. Only this time not with the aid of mythology, philosophy and deception. The veil must come tumbling down like the walls of Jericho through spiritualism, philosophy, science and technology. The problem with these outdated and small religions is that these beliefs, as I said, were the product of unification against the imminent or potential threat of invasion from their neighbors. That and of course the social control of the masses, so as the many would not rob the few of all the prestige, wealth and power, for tradition could not hold back the pleas of the starving and suffering millions without the help of religion to pacify them. This is what Marx meant when he stated that religion is the opium of the masses. However, when they did unite and expand both politically and religiously, they waged war on. There would be attackers and assailants, and so these religions became cut off from their doctrines. With the subjugation of the free will by brainwashing and transforming their followers from disciples into soldiers, is at its most basic form, is breaking God's commandment of thou shalt not kill. Let alone that we should love our enemies and neighbors like we love our God, not subject them to blood and malicious violence. Of course, the threat today is not the mighty Egyptian or Roman armies. It is the addiction of money and power fueled by selfish politics, resulting in global mismanagement and out-and-out planetary neglect and destruction. I think it is self-evident from tonight's alcoholic symposium that we all agree that there should be a spiritual and political reformation, beginning with the awareness of the self and the truth, on through to single, global and spiritual karma. Theists, as we all know, believe that God is absolute, and as was said earlier, his nature is all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful, and he is always present. So how can his nature be complete and made out of only these constituents if he neglects, allows, or creates the tsunami, the supervolcano, or an ice age within his creation, killing all the plants, animals and humans? Then Richard spoke. Do you know that according to the Bible that all mediums and spiritualists should be put to death? He did not wait for a reply to his question, and he carried on. Spiritualism, according to the Bible, is naught but trickery by Satan and his fallen angels. Because they are fallen angels, they know what we do, or what we have done, and they use this knowledge so as they can pretend to be our deceased relatives. They promise heaven for all and offer everyone eternal life, even if we have not lived an honest, righteous life. When in the Bible it clearly states that at death we all go to sleep until Jesus resurrects us at the end of days, where we will be judged for the way we have lived our lives and our devotion to both Jesus and God, and then only those that are worthy will go to heaven, and the rest of us will go to eternal damnation. Patrick spoke out. Christians say that psychology, near-death experiences, and the afterlife are making their faithful flock stray from the Word of God and into a world of darkness, trickery, and denial. They say that the best trick that the devil ever did was convincing us all that he does not exist. They tell us that we should turn our backs on the workings of the devil and his fallen angels and read the good book that was given to us by God, and that it holds the only truth, and that it was scribed by God's prophets, and it is above all the humans' ologies and isms. They also say that the only spirit that we should let into our lives is Jesus, and that we should have faith in him and all of his teachings if we want to get to heaven. He paused, then carried on. I must say that if one looks at the devil as a play on words, when looking at it backwards one can see that evil is live and the devil is lived. But what do we consider to be a well-lived life? Is it to live a life of the ancient Romans, or the Christians? He was asking a rhetorical question, and he did not look for a reply from the people in the room. He carried on. A well-lived person is an experienced, or a wise person, so it is knowledge that is the antidote to the devil, not God. If you have wisdom you will know that the devil does not exist, it was invented by Heraclitus. Yes, you will reach the conclusion that he was made up by the people who wrote the Bible. They made it up so as they could beguile us, or persuade us to follow their good book. The best way to follow God, or the Bible, is not to just believe, or have blind faith. It is to do what it says within its stories, and that is to come together, and look out for each other under one flag, one love. Virtuosity, wisdom and knowledge are the keys to heaven, or the light, and they are the true crucifixes to keep evil at bay. So come together and unite under virtuosity, tolerance, compassion, kindness and unconditional love. Yes, come together with knowledge and love. Then Pauline interjected from the back of the crowd. The common denominator is meditation. I reckon that if they took a photo before and after some meditation, that the aura would escalate in its intensity in the latter, probably indicating that something was occurring, perhaps even metaphysically, as so many spiritual philosophies hypothesize. She was cut short when Bella asked, "Would you mind if I was to cut in?" "Not at all. Go ahead, Bella," she replied. Well, there are many places that you can experience spirit outside of what Kirsten and Pauline has just mentioned, and one of them is chosen, or consequential karma. Chosen karma deals with both free will and probability, and how it works is that there is a blueprint that our soul must connect with, and that the free will and intuition must, as it has already been suggested, indeed work together in spiritual harmony. For although the soul mind remembers its soul's purpose, it remains almost silent, for the present mind starts with a clean slate for this life, as it tries to balance out its spiritual karma with its mental amnesia and physical life, and how it bridges the gap is by utilizing its spiritual potential and listening to one's inner spiritual voice. The way that I see it is the same as Kylie when she said that one has numerous paths and or destinies, and one's choices with one's free will connects one to a specific probable path or chosen karmic destiny to which we must fulfill to perfect our karma. That way, free will walks in harmony with probability. Yes, there are many paths that lead to home. Is not karma just a hypothesis? Asked Frederick, who had also joined the conversation. Well, karma is recognized in many different cultures and world philosophies, and although they might attach their own reasons for it, it is self-evident as to how, if not why, it occurs. For instance, as Kirsten mentioned before, you find it in Buddhism. There is also Tibetan Buddhism, which is spiritual, and that is where we live our lives like we do. Then at physical death we enter a mental state, where we sort out our karma, and after that we become pure spirit for a while, until we want to enter life on the earthly plane of existence once more, and as soon as we get that desire we are born into a new life, and it all starts again. Then, as Kirsten also mentioned, you have the Hindu. Of course, with the two philosophies that I just mentioned, the former are atheists, apart from the Tibetan path, and the latter are pantheists. Although there is a theist Hindu version that has a separate goal. Basically, Brahman is creating characters in his play for his own pleasure, in a kind of universal dream, or imagining. The world is the stage, we are the characters, and our joint lives are the play. However, let us not stray off the beaten path, let us resume to where I was at. She paused, then went on. She took another sip of the wine, and as she did, everyone present was eager to lap up the wisdom. There are many different beliefs of how one sheds the past negative baggage, as I have said. There are even those that believe in hypnotic regressive reincarnation. They believe that one should revert back into previous lives and relive the experiences that are causing the traumas over and over, like one does in psychoanalysis in our present incarnation, to relive and shed old baggage cathartically, and or desensitizing those offensive and disempowering past life traumas that hold us back from finding and achieving our soul's purpose. And as amazing as it seems, the results are outstanding and seem to heal the parts of our traumatized psyches that conventional psychologies cannot reach. Even more outstanding is that with the aid of hypnotism, subjects have even been propelled into future lives. Although because this research is relatively new, and that to fulfill these prophesies the subjects will have to physically die in this incarnation, and then get reborn into the next, we will not know until the future life states reach the present. There is also again, with the aid of hypnotism, subjects or people that have been placed into a theta mind state instead of the usual alpha state, and it is in this state that the subjects have been shifted into neither their past or present incarnations on the physical world, but that place that is in between their physical incarnations. The subjects from the superconscious state explain that they in our physical karma is a learning ground as we progress toward the Creator itself, and that is what I mean when I say chosen karma, for we choose with the powers that be the best paths to balance our karma to reach perfection. I must stipulate that we are not the hosts of an ethereal alien attack, for both they and we are created for and by a higher entity and spiritual purpose. At physical birth, the superconscious beings become passive or dormant as they meld into their host and new chosen karma. We live out a cycle of birth and rebirth, totally unaware of our dual existence and past lives, until at physical death, or when we reveal all in our hypnotic state, or reunite with our soulmates, guides and our spiritual integrity and purpose. Eventually, we lift above, or no longer need our physical karma, as we progress toward the Creator, and help with creation itself. There was a mixture of awe and laughter at the last statement. She took another pause and another sip of wine, then gulped it down as she passed on the empty wineglass to Sally to refill it for her, and then she carried on. Then finally, for this conversation, of course, there is Wicca, Socrates, and even the 12th house in astrology. However, we need go no further, for all we have to do is recognize that all these philosophies and beliefs recognize the existence of karma. Even the layman suggests, what goes around comes around, do they not? No one answered, although a few nodded. She went on. So there it is. Although karma may not be considered as the truth, for there are many versions, that the same process is recognized throughout them all, and that is, that in nature there is a spiritual law of cause and effect, although it seems to state that it is we ourselves, and not some impersonal entity, or force that is in control of our personal lives and affluent destinies. Just like that of the ripple effect, when one has thrown a pebble into a pond, so it is that one's actions, choices and even one's attitude opens up doorways into our ever-expanding destinies. So, the idea is that one follows one's two selves responsibly and respectably and works with spirit as we travel through our karmic journey. One should think positively and love unconditionally, making sure those ripples are constructive and optimistic in every way, and at the same time, let one's second body be one's guide as it feels its way through life. Listen to your intuition and let your inspiration flow, for this is just two of the ways in which the second body communicates or aids your soul's journey, and every now and then when one falls on difficult times that seem to be out of context with your life, your choices and your actions, do not let it halt your journey or spoil your mood. Simply see it as some old karma that you and the powers that be have laid in your path, that has been presented to you so as you can overcome your past's mistakes by resolving them in the now. Here is a little karmic chant that I picked up, and if one chants it at the beginning and end of each day, then it should help one to have a full, prosperous, loving, ambient karmic journey. My thoughts create my actions create my habits create my personality with its choices, beliefs and actions creates my destiny. At that she became quiet and listened for any response from the crowd. The crowd murmured a response, then went quiet, and then Persephone spoke out. I suppose one could attach that to the wrath of Gaia, or world karma, could one not? Eyes homed in and more ears perked up at the mention of world karma, Persephone went on. Well, if one begins to observe nature, and by that I mean all natural things, one cannot help but see that all things are connected and interdependent, and humankind should have respect and responsibility for being at the head of the food chain and intellectually supreme, and should look after the world like gardeners and zookeepers. And on top of that, they should dissolve all borders and barriers and begin to see our world on a global level, and get a supercomputer or quantum computer to calculate exactly what crops grow where and when all over the world, and then grow them and share them out equally and efficiently. Further, we should educate the lower classes and the people of the third world on procreation, overpopulation, and contraception, and at the same time give them access to college or apprenticeships, which will bring about more career opportunities, so everyone has an equal chance at personal success. And in this way we could help the natural order of things on a global karmic level, and then everything would be hunky-dory. Staying with the classics, for we do not have to get too deep and fundamental, one can see how what goes around comes around could have a global effect. Now, you know when chaos theory stated that when the butterfly beats its wings that the energy it gives off, although small and seemingly inconsequential, attaches itself or joins up with the like, and before you know it is one of the tiny constituents that when working together form the mighty destructive wind of a hurricane on the opposite side of our globe. Well, if we with our manufactured nature, or our mindless control of nature, do not take heed to the connectedness and interdependence of all things, then from say the extinction of say just one species of butterfly, that with that kind of selfish and destructive behavior we could end up with a global catastrophe. We all know about the effects of global warming. Plastics, the burning of fossil fuels and air pollution, and the destruction of the rainforests, and no doubt in some circles humankind is looking for the remedy. However, what we should be doing is finding symmetry with nature, and instead of trying to control it, flow with it so that our species realigns itself with the connectedness and interdependence of all natural things. Armies are no good. We must find a different style of revolution, one that can become a world holiday of the future, like Independence Day is for America, so future generations can stand up and say that this world holiday is when humankind reconnected with nature. Now, before theism there was, as we talked of earlier, pageantry, and with this pageantry many believed in the world soul. Some said it was female, and they called it Gaia, and even today we call it Mother Nature. Although we have left these beliefs behind, as like today we are gradually doing with theism, before we throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, we must value their properties, and see if they are still relevant. I am sure that spirit is everywhere, and that it is probably connected and interdependent too with our actions and reactions, or our interplay with nature. Common sense says that if you spray poison in your kitchen, you will die when you eat the food that is stored and prepared there. So if spirit is connected to nature, as it was suggested earlier, then it would be self-evident that a world karma would be part of it too. Personally, I think that God is a conscious dreamer, and it will dream on for all eternity, and it is love that sparks the will to its survival, and how it gets that love is by our personal and unique journeys, as we love our way through our lives in its most spectacular play that we call life. As for having the blueprints, or the grand plan, do we really need to know? The self-fulfilling prophecy, basically, if we see our future then our actions and expectancies will lead us into it, be it negative or positive. However, we cannot change our future, because our futures are wrapped up in a string of probable outcomes that are activated by our free will, imagination and destiny. We think that we can change our future, but it was our destiny to change the outcome, hence, we saw a probable destiny, which was not really our future, but a signpost to help us to reach a decision to attain our actual future. So applying this to precognition, when the mother removed her child from beneath the chandelier, or the people who didn't board the Titanic thought that they had changed their future, they did not. For it was their destiny to see the sign or precognition, and then, because of it, decide to change the outcome of it, which saved them from their probable deaths. So when I decided to not go to Top Shop at Western Road, because of the dream, it was already written that I would go to the Top Shop in London Road, that had the cashier saying what she said in reference to the scarf, and this was made obvious when I met up with the children in North Street, which was the same as the dream. Basically, the future was already pre-written. Because if I decided to go to Western Road, I would not have witnessed the cashier saying what she said. So the dream helped me to decide my future, even though it seemed like with my free will that I could hold my own destiny in my own hands. However, I did not. Basically, no matter how it seems on the surface, ultimately we cannot cheat fate. So I personally believe that our futures are set. Victor cut in. So you are saying that just like the self-fulfilling prophecy can lead us to our future, that it could also help us to avoid that future. But then how do we know that we have changed our destiny with our free will? Because the prophecy could have been a ruse to lead us to our true destiny, which was to avoid a probable death, or to buy the dress in London Road and not Western Road. He looked to Ruth, and she nodded her head to give the affirmative. He went on. To say that we are predestined, you must have a design, and a designer, and perhaps free will is part of that plan. He paused. I don't think that I am determined, for whenever life deals me a blow I decide what to do with my future. I mean that I can either give up and lay there defeated, or take the blow and get up and carry on regardless. Monica shifted her position to join into the conversation, then she said, I know that what has been said leaves one still unsure on what to believe when it comes to free will and determinism. However, that uncertainty is only there when one opposes the other, like say day and night. Still, what happens when one does not place one against the other and suggests that we can have both free will and determinism at the same time? Of course, I can see clearly that it seems hypocritical, and that when George tried to change his precognitive dream, that he seemed to have no control. So I suppose that we should say free will and probability, to be more pedantic. I think that if one rationalizes and tries to change their destiny, that one can end up with George's outcome and/or scenario. Or perhaps his recall of the dream was not the whole dream, and it was his decision to try and change it in the way that he did that was the missing link that made it look as if he had failed to outwit his insight into his future. Which leaves us with the question of is there a creator? So let us look into it and see what we find. She took a pause and then proceeded. To do this I must now speak of God and religion, and I must say that this is another strange coincidence, for it has been plaguing my mind as of late. I will not lower myself to out-and-out blasphemy, though I must say that if God has the personality of always being present, of being all-powerful, all-knowing and all-loving, then how can one explain his careless, vindictive or contradictive actions? I mean, if he was all-loving, how could he accept the torturous fates of lost innocence? Not the torture created from immoral acts, but from the kind of torture that comes from natural disasters like earthquakes, tidal waves, volcanoes, tsunamis and the like. It goes without saying that this is more in the domain of malevolence rather than benevolence to allow this to happen, and have the power and the know-how to stop it before the actual tragedy takes place. If one proposes that God set the wheels in motion, and then sat back, and let his universe unfold, and so the natural disasters that I stated before are the workings of not God, but nature, then what are the chosen ones that are resurrected at the end of days going to do when nature takes away our planet, when our sun, which is a third or fourth generation star, explodes at the end of its own natural course and cycle? Where are the Christians going to go on that day of judgment? And if they are transported onto another world, into another solar system, why is it that there is no mention of it in any spiritual literature? Does God or his prophets suffer from deception? If God was to have the four personality traits that I have just mentioned, then he must also be a confused, forgetful, malevolent God. Either that or a lazy, selfish, good-for-nothing God. If there is a creator, we certainly do not understand its personality, and that is why I personally value a spiritual force and journey. In addition to that, to follow any kind of deity with blind faith leaves no room for personal hypothesizing or conjecture, and I cannot see the point of having free will if we are not supposed to, or allowed to use it. I believe that one should follow what feels intuitively good and experientially right. If one has an interface into the future plan, then free will and probability could work together, and I think that as suggested, if one can connect to one's ESP or intuition, this could be the cornerstone to my hypothesis. What I mean is that one can have an insight into the blueprints of one's karma, and the two can unite. In a nutshell, if one begins to listen to one's inner voices and cancels all the negative thoughts out as personal demons, and at the same time listens and works with the thoughts that promote positive results, be it self-developmental or caring for others, that eventually one should find a harmony within their unity. If one forgets the prophet as a person and sets one's life journey to what was actually being said, one would find that underneath their own personal perspectives, that they all fundamentally share the same wisdom. Now, pagans were just limited to their local tribal environments, be it from their folklore and local mythology, or their shamans or witches. However, even they unite with the teachings of the great masters, and in turn they all unite in the common good. And I think that Monty Python's film, which was called The Meaning of Life, summed it all up nicely when at the end they said, "Oh yes, the meaning of life. Well, remember, be good and try to be nice to each other," or words to that respect. Then, Julie asked, "I can see what you say for everyone except for the witches, for do they not coerce with the dark forces, and even fly at full moon and frequent graveyards? Can you explain to me how they fit in?" With which Monica answered, "Well, witches are a form of pagan, and it is now understood that they were herbalists, just like Holland and Barrett, if they were white witches, and they used their spells to heal people and bring joy and harmony into their lives. Then there were black witches, who used to do the opposite, and they also used animal offerings to give to their pagan deities, to accomplish their evil tasks. You also had necromancy, and they were spiritualists that were in communion with the dead. And last but not least, there were ghostbusters, that would sleep in graveyards, then in their astral forms give guidance and wisdom to the new and lost souls, so as they could cross over and go on to dwell in the light where they now belonged. On the one hand, the Catholics had no problem with the white witches, and they used to exorcise demons from possessed individuals, whereas the Protestants punished everybody, even the depressed and people who were suffering from epilepsy, stating that they were possessed by the devil. However, that is enough about witches and mediums. Let me, if you will, share with you my own experience of my destiny, my free will and my intuition. Please do. Julie said aloud, and the rest of the crowd in their own diverse ways, like the buyers at an auction, gave their affirmations too. The other day, when I was on my way to paying my brother a visit, I had an intuition to get off of the bus so as not to miss the connection. I have 2 bus stops in which to do this, but I always end up taking the latter, because it has a clock and a digital information LED display unit above the stop, and I know how long it will take for the next bus to arrive. Anyway, I knew that I was supposed to get off on the earlier bus stop, or I would miss the bus when I was still on the bus in between stops. Nonetheless, I ignored my intuition, and just as I had envisioned, or suspected, I was in between stops and still on the bus as I watched the bus go by. Now, instead of moping around and waiting what would have seemed like an eternity for the next bus to come, I decided that, because I had a saver ticket, that I would stay on the bus and enjoy the ride, as my ticket had no limits on how many buses that I could catch that day anyway. So on the bus I stayed. Kim was with me, and she asked why we had not got off at the stop, and I replied that I was having a ride. I got off of the bus 7 stops on, and then got back onto another bus in the direction that we had come. Kim nodded the affirmative. Anyhow, the bus that we got back onto, which was one of many, and to us the choice was also random, would stop at the stop that was the original stop that I should have gone to earlier. I informed Kim that I had denied my intuition by not getting off of the former stop originally. However, I had received another intuition that had informed me to take this course of action, of which I had decided to follow. As our bus pulled into the stop, we both saw to our surprise that the other bus was in front, and we got off of the bus and made the connection. At first the bus driver did not want to let Kim on, for he wanted to drive off even though he could not move, because of the lights, and a traffic jam was stopping him from moving. He chose to ignore her pleas. But when he saw my arrival, and because he was still at the stop, he had no choice but to drop his arrogance and open the doors to let us both on. When we arrived at my brother's house, I apologized for the delay and told him why, and he stated that if we had arrived earlier, that he would have been out, for he was walking his dog, and that he had only just got in. So the point to my story is that intuition, synchronicity, free will and probability were not at play, and that it was all down to destiny. So ironically, my brother would have been out if I did follow the original intuition. So it seems that the bus runaround was meant to be, which clearly shows that there was a higher force at play, and or everything happens for a reason, even if it is with God's and our joint intervention. Kim nodded in response. The crowd laughed and gave the affirmative, and then she added, "What I will say, though, to be more pedantic, is that precognitions and premonitions happen to us for a reason, and that being so that we can change our future, to get more enjoyable and satisfactory results from our choices and actions, or to avoid making ominous, drastic, or perilous mistakes that can corrupt or ruin our future, that are dished out to us with determinism." It was then that Maurice had his say. I remember in 1988 saying to a shopkeeper, who was also a DJ in a local music shop, about a change that was coming in underground music, and I told him that it would be called techno. He listened with compassion and perhaps with a little dash of condescendence, as he probably thought that he had the authority to say what was to come musically. He shifted his position then. It was about 6 months later, and techno was everywhere and influencing everything. When I said to him that I was looking for electronic dance music, and he replied that I was right with the techno, however lightning doesn't strike twice. And to back it up, he said everybody was using samplers, not synthesizers. He concluded with, "That I think that you are looking for the 80s. Then approximately a year later, when I entered his shop, his expression lit up with enthusiasm when he saw me, and he called me over and told me that a new kind of dance music had surfaced in the clubs and parties, and it was electronic, and it was called trance. On top of that, it was a couple of years back, when I had had a dream that Brighton and Hove Albion were in the Premier League, and they were safe and loving it. I was so impressed by the impact of the dream, because it also had a precognition feel to it, that I had placed a bet that they would get promoted come the end of the season in a local bookmaker's. However, when the time arrived, they missed out on goal difference, and because of this I thought that it could not have been a special dream after all. A year later, they were promoted with 3 games in hand, and then once in the Premier League, they had comfortably established themselves, and at present they are also playing in Europe, and we are a third of the way through the season, and so the dream had been prophetic after all. Or were they both probable that because of chance eventually one came into fruition? He took a breath, then exhaled, and then carried on. Thinking today about those incidents, it clearly shows that I was in tune with my intuition, and this seems to dictate that I had seen into the future. And if I saw the future, does this mean that my destiny was already set? And if that was the case, there must have been a design, and if you have that, you obviously have a designer. And just like I had seen the future, so had so many thinkers of old seen and wrote about things that were beyond them, that was to become clearer in the future, and that was a designer called Logos with today's thinking. Are we in God's dream? Maybe. Does God manifest our reality through its dreams? Perhaps. Could it be a conscious dreamer? We do not know. How does it survive, and what is our joint destiny? We also do not know. Does God hold the blueprints, or the grand plan? We can only speculate. The former would correlate with failed prophecies, the latter being that God is still beyond us. Does free will interact with our future, creating the difference between having the blueprints or the grand plan? Are we the co-creators of our reality? And taking it to its extreme, do we unite with God or become gods? We have not got a clue, however, that having been said, we do have our intuition. And with that said, he passed the talking position to Kylie. I would also like to speak of destiny and avoiding fate with the utilization of one's insight and free will that I read in Linda Williams' first book. She writes that she did a reading for a woman, and she told her that her daughter would die in a car accident. She said that she would be driving down a winding road in a blue sports car with the roof off, and that she would have an accident and die. The woman replied by telling her that her daughter did not own a blue sports car, so it could not be true, and the medium told her that it was definitely going to happen. She went on to say that she decides to take the scenic route when she could have taken another safer route instead. She told her that it is not her car that she is driving. She borrows it, although she does not know whom she borrows it from. Almost a year later, the medium gets a phone call from the woman, and she told her that her daughter worked for a car dealer, and it was a holiday weekend, and she drove home in a blue sports car. She said that her daughter was going to visit a friend, and that she usually took the more scenic route. However, she remembered what her mother had told her of the reading, so she took the motorway route instead. On the way back, they took the scenic route, not really believing in the prediction, but then suddenly the traffic was diverted to a single lane, and they found out that a tree had fallen about 3 hours earlier up the road, which would have been where they were if they had taken the scenic route. They decided that the prediction came true, and that it was not a coincidence, for she even had the color and make of the car right. This reinforces what I wrote about a potential and an actual path, or should I say, as others have already said, a probable path, and that there can be many exit points, because if the daughter had not taken her mother seriously, and at the same time the same can be said about the woman with the medium's advice, the daughter would have died. So I will conclude by saying that God is alive and watching over us, and wants us to use our God-given mind's insights and our natural abilities to sort out our lives, so we can all help to sculpture eternal matter, where all the souls, including our Creator itself, will all end up at the cosmos's finale.